There's a hidden challenge facing our police officers, and one that's rarely talked about, but deeply impacts their daily lives. I'm Sarah Subiata Bennett, and I'm thrilled to welcome you to the launch of Let's Talk Local. Today, we're broadcasting from our brand new studio with a very special guest, retired Assistant Police Chief of the Dallas Police Department, Ruben Ramirez. Together, we'll dive into this very overlooked issue and what it really means for those who serve and protect us. I'm excited to have you and Chief Ramirez here for our very first episode. Don't forget to like and subscribe to join us on this journey. Okay, first, you are our opening interview for Let's Talk Local. And so I am thrilled and honored that you're here. Your book goes into extreme detail about life in service, and what that looks like. You depicted your experiences in such a vulnerable, perfectly descriptive way. I was full of many emotions, crying. I was furious in some, I was happy in others. So thank you for your investment in this community. You have recently retired. Can you tell us the exact amount of time that you spent serving as a police officer and a chief?
So I did 29 years with the Dallas Police Department.
Almost 3 decades.
Almost 3 decades. Started at 22 years old. I've been on the command staff for 8 years. I was assistant chief for 4 years. Bureau chief over Criminal Investigations Bureau. I was the bureau chief over Tactical and Special Operations. And then most recently, I was the bureau chief over all patrol operations with City of Dallas before I retired 2 months ago. That's
right. And so you have 3 decades worth of experience. And I have not enough time to sit here and ask for more of your insight. Your wisdom is immense. And I don't think, I even interviewed the old police chief, Eddie Garcia, whom we all loved and who will be sorely missed.
I'll tell you that I didn't know that I was going to retire.
You didn't?
No. The backstory is, and you know this from reading the book, but the backstory is that Eddie Garcia tasked me with doing an assessment of DPD after we had seen a series of officers arrested for alcohol-related incidents. And so we knew that there had to be something bigger, so that this behavior was not just our officers discarding the law or feeling that they were just making this decision to drive intoxicated. There had to be something more. And so I went out to do an assessment, and through a series of different conversations throughout the PD, really for about a month of really in-depth conversations about the resources that are available, if they were being utilized, why or why not. I continued to hear the same themes. People were not using the resources. Very stoic police department, very hardened culture, to be really candid.
I understand that.
And it wasn't until one particular focus group conversation where it got kind of heated about mental and emotional health. And as you can imagine, many police officers don't want to hear a 2-star chief asking them about their mental health. And so through that conversation, the floodgates just opened up, and officers started sharing some of the most difficult parts of their job. And the things that they mentioned involved exposure to other people's tragedies, to other people's grief, other people's sadness. They talked about the sound of wailing mothers. They talked about contorted bodies at fatality car crashes. They talked about the awkward space at a suicide scene. And this is not what mainstream America believes is affecting police officers. But yet, in one of the most marquee cities in the world, our men and women are saying that these are the things that cause me to not sleep at night. These are the things that are affecting my mental and emotional health. And coincidentally, the things that they were mentioning were routine in nature. These were not the critical incidents which usually solicit some sort of support services. These are the routine calls. And so taking this information, it just grabbed me, and I thought, how could we have missed this? How could this not be part of the support system to check on our police officers when they're going to these very impactful, sad, grief-ridden calls? And that's how we came up with the checkpoint strategy. That's why we started implementing this whole program. And when I started to see the results, when I started to see SWAT operators, supervisors over SWAT standing up and talking about their difficulties and their challenges and encouraging our men and women to counseling, I knew that we had something really good here, and I wanted to spread it. And I've been able to see Fort Worth PD implement this exact strategy, Charlotte Mecklenburg PD implemented the checkpoint strategy. Carrollton, Rockwall. I've seen it spread, and I knew that this was what I wanted to be part of, and this is what I was meant to do. So I made the decision after talking with Eddie Garcia, and made the decision that I would transition after the summer. And in September, I officially parted ways with DPD.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm just grateful that you're here. In November of the same year, I saw that you and Chief Eddie Garcia were awarded just recently. Can you tell us a little bit about those awards?
We received the Shining Star Award for the development of this program. And
it's a big deal.
Yeah.
It's a big deal.
It's a big honor. I mean,
Huge
if there's
honor.
anything to, and Chief Garcia would second this, but of all the accomplishments that you can have in a PD, and there's nothing greater than building something that would have a legacy of support for our men and women, to give them the opportunity to come to this profession and actually thrive here and have a chance to be the men and women that we set out to be when we took this profession, is an incredibly powerful thing. And we're not done yet. We have many men and women who have come forward around the country requesting information about this program, and we aren't going to stop till we can bring the checkpoint strategy to every police or first responder entity in the country and beyond.
Looking at this book, you speak about an initial moment in your career, along with a bunch of other personal experiences that inspired you to write your book. Would you mind telling us a little bit about what all of those experiences together look like?
I mean, this is what it's like to be a police officer, an American police officer today.
That's right.
It is filled with emotions. I say in the book that policing is a very emotional profession, arguably the most emotional profession. And it's because of those reasons. It's because every day you are taking in some sort of sadness, some sort of frustration, some sort of difficulty. And it's difficult on the minds of our young, very impressionable men and women, public servant-hearted men and women, to come in and consume that amount of emotion. And I think this book, I was able to just capture some of those emotions and put it in a almost a manual that says, here's the blueprint to help the future generations, if nothing else, the future generations of police. And then it's equipped with anecdotals and stories that are incredibly relatable. And as I travel the country and present this program, the main thing I hear is, I had the exact same experience. I had a very similar story. When you open the book, the first chapter does talk about a very difficult call that I answered, a very young police officer. The short version is that a man handed me his little 3-year-old daughter that he had found floating in a swimming pool. And I talk about how difficult it was to sleep after that call or eat after that call. I didn't know why that one call, of all the calls, why that one call, I just couldn't move away. I couldn't move past it. This is what our men and women are exposed to on a daily basis, and sometimes far before even 4 years of exposure as I had. So this is what needs to be brought to the forefront in the discussion about staffing, recruiting, retention, pay and benefits. This is part of the formula, and it needs to have a voice tied to it, and it needs to be. I think that we need to bring attention to it and bring it out there so people know what that experience is like, and then we can talk about how it is that we can recruit better and just as importantly, retain.
Thank you so much for that. I was having to hold back tears as you were talking about that, because this was part of the reason why I was filled with fury. Because, and I know that you cannot comment on whether you agreed or disagreed with the proposition that the city passed. It's now law, Proposition U. And so an incremental amount of new revenue next year is going to be allocated to the police. And it is something I am so grateful for, because as I hear people talking about, a library or a park, and then I think about all of the sacrifice that the police endure on a daily basis, I think to myself, now that's just common sense. Want versus need. We need to take care of our officers. We must. Your lives are endangered every day, especially in Dallas. Everything that you do for our community is of utmost importance. Your service impacts crime. And I think now, after this next question that I have for you regarding a horrific event that everyone knows that took place on July 7th of 2016 that happened, the conversations are much more material because we see what it looks like to not have the police department appropriately funded and taken care of. And I'm very grateful that that's changing. You touched upon the aftermath that settled into the Dallas Police Department surrounding the silence of the horrific tragedy where 5 police officers were shot in the back and 7 others were wounded on July the 7th. There was silence. And you even wrote, I personally recall my oldest son, who was 15 at the time, calling me repeatedly while staying at his grandmother's house and watching the event on TV. I finally answered the phone and quickly told him that I was okay and to tell his mom that I would call them back as soon as I could. Can you describe the silence that fell upon the officers at DPD after this event and elaborate on what you wrote, which was, but what is the effect of knowing that the emotional part is hardly ever mentioned or addressed by the media or your own department? Does that also create a conditioning to not address it yourself because perhaps no one else believes it's worthy of addressing?
At that particular time, there was a reluctance of many police forces to really talk about or elaborate on the force that we used that led to the death of a suspect, even a suspect. Whether it was because there would still be some sort of litigation tied around the case, whether the case would have to be prosecuted if there was a defendant in the case. For whatever reason, there was a reluctance to talk about the details of it. And I think as I look back and did research after 8 years now removed, and even in the writing of this book, there were many police officers who still wanted to talk about that night. They want to share what it was that they experienced and really want to understand what their colleagues experienced as well. And there's many officers, particularly SWAT operators, who told me that here were some of the things they did, and they saw other officers doing things through their peripheral. It was very fast, but they would like to know who those officers were and really get a vantage point from them or a perspective from them. And for us in particular in Dallas, we were just we weren't talking about it. And then, when you combine that with some of the reluctance of maybe, even the media sources talking about what the details of what our actions were, it does condition your police force to think, well, if nobody's really talking about this, maybe I shouldn't be either. And we have to be, I think that, some of the understanding of what the experience is to be a police officer is that we are operating in a very thick culture, a very rich culture. And there is a sense of a herd mentality here. We are doing what our colleagues are doing. And so when we see other people not talking about it, including whether it's the public, whether it's our command staff or our supervisors, we tend to think that that's the direction we need to go as well. And in that particular case, and I will tell you, speaking from experience, it did us a disservice because as an assistant chief who took part in many disciplinary hearings of our officers who had become the subject of some sort of investigation. And when they cited some of the difficulties of their jobs or the things that they were carrying, they almost always referenced that night. So there was a lot of unhealed wounds as a result of it. And I think that the awareness and the discussion in a platform and venue of their choosing would have been beneficial. And I don't think that many of our police officers got the opportunity to do that. And I think that exists in a large part throughout the country as well.
First responders are often seen as the very silent type. Not the silent type, but they just handle it internally as best as they possibly can. How do societal perceptions and the culture of silence that you've often observed within emergency services specifically impact their mental well-being?
Over the last 3 years, we've heard more about wellness. This is a very popular subject throughout the country. Whether post-pandemic world, I think, brought a lot of attention to that. I think in the police world, when you looked at the post-George Floyd protests and marches. That was a very difficult space for a lot of police forces. I think there was a lot of attention placed on them for misconduct and behaviors that were the actions of a few, but yet a lot of police officers and police departments got kind of grouped into that. And it appeared to be from a lot of police colleagues of mine, it appeared to be that everyone was being kind of lumped into the group of the actions of others, and what was most difficult was not necessarily the scrutiny about the need for change and really the examining of practices. That wasn't the bothersome part. What was really bothersome to a lot of police officers was they said, no one really came to our rescue. No one really defended us. No one really stood up and said, well, let's hold on a second here. We shouldn't broad brush this. And that was one of the things that bothered or took an emotional toll on police forces. I think when you combine that along with the culture that really, for almost 150 years in our city of Evolution has always had a difficulty of getting these mental health and support resources through that cultural wall. No one ever really tried anything different. We saw newer and newer platforms, newer and newer applications. There were more modern and upgraded therapy centers and rehab centers. There was fantastic psychiatrists and clinicians, but not a lot of focus or emphasis put on integrating through that cultural wall. And I think that without that, we really did, again, what we'd always done in the past, which is just pack it down and grit it out and get back to work.
And something that I don't think I was totally forthcoming about with you in the past is that I went to trauma treatment in 2022 for a lot of trauma that I had as a child, young girl. And so I was in inpatient treatment for about 40 days, being treated for intimacy issues as well as the trauma. And but any woman there had significant trauma, most sexual trauma. And many officers, higher ups in the military, women, had such horrific experiences. And I, too, was very good at stuffing everything down. And I was treated for workaholism because of that. I just ignored. I know some people struggle with alcoholism or drugs or whatever it might be, but it kills us slowly. It just erodes the fabric of our existence. And so the mental health of the police department, the men, is something that I was not as understanding about until I read your book. And you talked extensively about the secondary trauma and how faith got you to where you are today. Would you mind sharing a little bit about your stories surrounding the secondary trauma that men and women in the workforce are subject to every day, and also the role that faith played in helping you recover from some of your darkest moments?
Even the story about the little girl that I mentioned earlier, the effects of that call itself. I talked about, experiencing difficulty eating, not really sleep, not really understanding exactly what I was experiencing. Just knowing that for some reason I felt different. I in my mind, I just needed to make it to my days off. This happened in Dallas. We were on 8-hour shifts, 5-day work weeks. This happened on my Monday, so I had 5 days to go. When the effects really started hitting me, we're around the third day. I was still really struggling, and a suspecting police officer reached out to me, and he noticed that something was not right with me, I guess. And he took the initiative to reach out and just check on me. And he just said, hey, Ruben, how are you? And I said, I'm okay. And he just got right into it and said, that call you went to the other day, those can be tough. And he says to me, shares a story about a car wreck that he had been to 20 years prior. Mm-hmm. He said he was working downtown Dallas, pickup truck, a little 9-year-old boy was in the bed of a pickup truck, and that pickup truck had rolled over. And he says that little boy was alive when he got to the scene, and he says, said he had talked to him. And he says, we eventually raised the truck up, rushed that little boy to the hospital. And he says to me, Ruben, that little boy died. He says, and I have spent the last 20 years of my career angry. He says, I've been mad at everyone. I've been mad at this city. I've been mad at the mayor, the police chief, my supervisor, you name it. And he knew I was a faith guy. And he says to me, he goes, you go to church. He goes, why don't you go talk to somebody at your church? And I didn't understand exactly what I was feeling at the time. I didn't know why he was sharing this with me, but I felt his understanding. I felt his empathy. And he gave me good guidance. He directed me to a professional. So I said, okay. And I drove that night. I rolled up my window and I drove straight to a Catholic church that was down the way. Mm-hmm. And I knocked on that door, and I knocked until someone answered the door that night, and a priest answered the door. And I just blurted out. I just said, I can't eat, can't sleep. And he asked me some questions, asked me if I knew this little girl, if I knew the family. I said, no, never met him before in my life. And he says to me, he says, officer, what you're describing, he says, is grief. He says, you're not eating, you're not sleeping. He says, you're grieving for a family that you don't even know. And he says to me, officer, that is going above and beyond the call of duty. He says, that is protecting and serving at the highest level. Mm. And I share that story for a couple reasons, but one, because I didn't have, at 26 years old, I didn't have a family member or a friend who could have taken that horrible incident and reframed it in a manner that allowed me to see some sort of nobility in what I had been through and what I was carrying. But he did, and it helped me. And it was a professional perspective. It was a professional lens that I needed at just the right time. And so, I would learn later that experience and that interaction with that professional, and in my case with that priest, were meant for me to take note of. And 24 years later, as an assistant chief, now making decisions on discipline and the future and the careers and fate of our men and women, I got the opportunity to replicate that interaction, and that's the checkpoint model. That's the blueprint in the book I wrote of.
In your leadership and management, especially in your last days spent at the DPD, I know you instituted this entire checkpoints program and model that is now being used across the country. Can you just talk briefly about some of the common signs of emotional burnout among first responders that often go unnoticed?
I think in policing we tend to show a sign of or behaviors like dark humor. We talk about in first responder community we have dark humor. We see a lot of negativism. We see people just kind of getting angry about things, or short fuse. We've all seen those incidents where cops have kind of blown their cool, but we also see a lot of kind of stoic demeanor as well. So I think that each of those is a byproduct of just consuming secondary trauma, what I call other people's grief, other people's tragedy, other people's sadness, and really just wanting to continue to show up for the community, not believing that the community really wants to see you kind of an emotional wreck, which I get that part. They don't, but there's only so much that you can consume and just throw to the back before it starts to back of your mind, before it starts to manifest into some sort of negative conversation or some sort of dark humor, or even worse, where you start to see the deterioration of your work product, maybe the more discourteousness to the community. And what is extremely unfortunate about the current model that exists in most police agencies in the country is that many of them index on behaviors. We are looking for behaviors to decide whether or not there's some sort of intervention might be needed or some sort of resources might be needed. And while I think there's a place for that, I think it's also very important to recognize that a lot of bad things have to have already happened and been consumed before the point where you're showing these behaviors. And we say things like early intervention, but early is a very relative term.
It is.
Right? We can be early before a police officer, God forbid, takes his life. We can be early before a police officer ruins his career, loses his family. Or we can actually be early and recognize that cumulatively these calls are impactful, and we should be offering support and normalizing the conversation well early on before those behaviors start to manifest.
But in the actual book, you didn't talk about any cost associated with the implementation of this model. Could you give just a ballpark idea of how it's executed, or how it was executed here?
Yeah, sure. So the checkpoint strategy is very simply you're recognizing that almost every police agency in the country currently has a peer support model. Peer support was a concept that was created in the 1970s and out of LAPD, and on paper makes perfect sense, right? We have peers who are here to support their colleagues. They have similar experiences, so they should be able to support them. But on paper, it makes perfect sense, but it really doesn't have as strong a practical application. It doesn't really address the cultural impediments. And so what I propose is that every agency take that very reactive peer support model and let's change it to a proactive checkpoint model. And so the difference is, in a peer support model, you generally just ask for volunteers to come forward and be part of peer support. You don't do that in a checkpoint strategy. In the checkpoint strategy, you are specific about who is going to be doing the checking. We are only going to use the men and women that other police officers look up to, the ones that they respect. And so we go into an agency, we identify them, we develop them, we basically rally call them. We tell them, you have something that these stars on my collar will never have, nor will any PhD on the wall have. Mm-hmm. You have influence within this organization, and no one is coming to our rescue. In fact, no one ever has in this mental and emotional health space. So we rally them to be the messengers, and we tell them, you're not going to do therapy on anyone. You're not going to have to ask people how they're feeling or share any person. All you're going to do is say, hey, I know those calls can be tough. I'm here if you need anything. I'm working. We've got resources. If you need, if you want to know more, let me know, and I'll be happy to send it to you. If nothing else, save my phone number. I'm available if you need anything. It's just a checkpoint. It's a 15-second call. But you do it with so much frequency at such a ratio that you can't help but normalize the conversation. Mm-hmm. And then you start to see the culture change. You start to see our ultimate goal, which is making our men and women receptive to the vast resources that are out there. So it's almost a philosophical shift. We are taking our models that are really in the dugout and we're putting them on the playing field. And we've seen it, and we've seen its success. We've seen it work, and we see, the probably the one factor that I love the most is that this program is receptive to the first responders. Like, they're the ones who like this. They're the ones who advocate for it and champion it, and they're the ones who are leading it. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't cost an agency money to make that shift. Now, you have to allocate resources to be able to do that. And when we talk about this environment where we have fewer and fewer resources and we need to recruit better, police departments will often be very quick to say, well, I don't have the resources for it. Well, I would challenge that you don't have the resource. You don't have the budget to not do something like this.
That's right. Because
when you start looking at your attrition numbers, mm-hmm. especially the 1 to 5 year officer that we're losing, mm-hmm. And coincidentally, the checkpoint strategy is you're taking your experienced officers, your senior officers, and you're checking on those 1 to 5 year officers most frequently. So it's like we've got to get out of our old antiquated thinking about mental health, emotional health, recruiting, retention, all being, just go, put a flyer together or put a website or try to recruit them to our city. You've got to think more in depth about all of these concepts, and the way that you recruit in today's world, in part, is letting your recruit know that if we use the checkpoint strategy, you don't ever have to come forward if you're struggling here. We'll come to you. That's appealing to a potential candidate, knowing that they are going to be checked on during the first few years of their career so frequently, developing a network, relationships, normalizing a discussion about emotional health, resources being provided to them, is a retention tool. So when we're using our senior officers and they're getting to do what it is they've always really come here to do, which mm-hmm. is protect and serve, but in this case, they're getting to also share their experiences and help create an environment where some of these younger officers who look up to them won't go through some of the difficulties that they did. And I think that it just serves multiple purposes, and it creates a healthier culture for your PD, which is going to create a safer community, because a healthy cop, he or she is operating with really all the tools that we want them to have to serve our communities at the level that we expect them to. And so it's got multiple benefits, but we've got to get out of our old way of thinking.
Let's say you're out at a job fair and you're trying to recruit people. The amount of time that it takes one person to come on to DPD, amount of time it takes to train them, and the cost associated with that entire system to the very first day that they're actually on the field?
Well, the recruiting costs, those will vary because if we're doing stuff, local recruiting fairs versus traveling.
Sure.
But from a time frame, I think Dallas is probably pretty expeditious in finding a recruit that is eligible and getting them into the academy. But we could say probably on the short time frame, about 3 months. Once you get a police recruit into the academy, now you have a 9-month training cycle in the academy. Mm-hmm. After you've successfully completed the academy, now you have 6 months of field training where you have to ride with a senior officer before you're actually able to get out on the street. So that timeline alone is probably, where are we math-wise? Somewhere over a year and a half, closer, probably embarking on 2 years.
2 years, yeah.
To be able to get to go from a job fair to the qualifying and hiring to where they're out on their own, protecting and serving in a squad car. Cost, that in Dallas, our cost is probably around the $150,000 range to go through the recruiting, the training, and kind of get to that full-fledged. Other cities may be more, depending on what types of equipment they provide. If you start adding equipment to it, because everyone, when they graduate, is outfitted with their vests, their body cams, their tasers, weapons, and whatnot. So the cost is it's probably up there in the $200,000 to get and about almost 2 years.
Okay, and now would you describe the space, the academy, and what is needed to hire potentially more? And let's just say 50 more police in 1 year.
Well, I think there's a lot of logistical components to it. Mm-hmm. I mean, you've got to have the facility, first of all, to be able to house that amount of recruits.
What is a facility like right now? I know this, but I want our viewers and listeners to know.
If it's not terrible, it'll do for terrible until replacement. It's not good. It's it resembles probably just a shopping strip, I think, from the 70s. Mm-hmm. It's just it lacks curb appeal, and that's the understatement of probably. But yes, so it's not a very attractive. I know that the staff out there has done a lot to try to modify and make as much adjustments. So I want to make sure that they're getting the credit for all those commanders and staff that have been at the academy trying to do what they can. But it lacks in comparison to any other major city. So that's the first piece that I think doesn't set us off on the right foot. I know, and there's a lot that's been done to bring a lot of discussion and funding. I think that's in the works to bring a newer academy. But as it is right now, it's not good.
Mm-hmm. And how many people can you train in that academy today at maximum?
I don't know. I've never been of all my bureau chief assignments. I was never over administrative bureau that included the academy. My understanding is they've been successful at moving 250 recruits through that academy a year. And I think they've pretty consistently been able to do that. But what winds up happening is that for every police recruit that you're going to move through the academy, you've got to have an equal or greater number of trainers that are going to be able to help train them, particularly when they graduate the academy, because now you're on field training, and you've got to take a training officer, a senior officer, out of his call answering responsibility, primary call answering responsibilities to train. And they may get to a point pretty quickly where they can go out and answer 2-man calls and be effective. But that trainer is going to have to, he's watching and grading and assessing that police officer. So there's just kind of a little bit of a focus that has to go towards that. And when you talk about moving more than, I guess 250 recruits out of the academy and into the field training component, that's at least 250 field trainers that have to be out there. And so if you increase those numbers, you're going to have to increase your field trainers as well.
And have you all been hitting the maximum 250 recruits and trainees per year?
I believe over the last few years they've been in that vicinity. I don't know exact numbers. I think they've been fairly close. I will tell you that the biggest, to me, the even greater challenge is not necessarily recruiting, but it's retaining.
Retention.
We lose about that many police officers a year, if not more.
Do you think with normalization and equalization of pay, so increasing pay, do you think that will help to address a lot of the retention issues?
I don't think pay alone will solve that problem. I think it will help. I think that I think there was a time when police officers would come to the field and many of them felt this was a calling. They were here to protect and serve, and all of the other ancillary components to what the job might involve. I think they were very second to that. I don't know that the new workforce believes that, and so I think that having fair compensation is a big part of it. And I think that because all police departments we're fishing in the same pool.
Yeah.
We've got to be competitive in that space, or we won't get the second look. And Dallas is a great city. It's a world-known city, world-class city. But this city is also, it has its challenges for the police force. It is not an easy city by most standards to be a police officer. You are going to be faced with challenges here. They're going to be, all types of crime. I usually like to say that crime has no address, but it does have areas that it frequents, and so we've got to be very real about what we put our police officers up against here, and this is not this is I don't think it's easy to be a major city police officer, and Dallas is no exception to that standard.
What are some of the top 3 most difficult hurdles that you all have faced in Dallas? I know the frustration surrounding the response time. If you can talk a little bit about that, the response time for the different tiers and thresholds.
Well, yeah. So response times these are quality of life issues. When our community calls 911, that is not it's not a good day for them. And so when you're not having a difficult time and you have to get to the point where you pull your phone out and call 911, you not only hope that somebody answers that call, you hope that a police officer arrives or somebody that can help you. If we're not hitting our response time goals, then I think that's frustrating for the community member, but it's also frustrating for the police officer. No police officer ever became a police officer because they wanted to arrive an hour or two after a citizen community member called them or needed them. So that's frustrating. Violent crime is obviously, that's a big one, and we have to address violent crime. And I think we do. I think the city has a good plan in place, and I think it's been effective. But there are so many other parts to that equation than police officers arresting a bad guy. I mean, if the judicial system isn't doing its part, if the community is not doing their part to be the eyes and ears, we will never hit those crime fighting goals either. So I think it's that same theme. Historically we looked at things like response times, reducing crime, as almost one dimensional, like this is all you have to do. But the reality is, in order to do each of those, there's got to be a lot of different things happening. And and that includes today just investing into technology and making sure that the administrative functions of a police department that were not around to the degree that they are now 10 years ago, like every police detective in Dallas PD at least, if not the entire country, can tell you that their responsibilities have increased by at least 40% over the last 5 or 10 years with the new administrative responsibilities due to technology. But yet, I don't know that our investment or infrastructure in technology has matched that, so that the products that we're using, the technology we're using, can be user friendly and that we can streamline like it needs to be. And so yeah, those frustrations are all part of it. And until really there's just a very 360-degree look at what investments are needed in order to make a police department as efficient as they possibly can be, including their staffing, then only then will you get a really good look at what the staffing model needs to be. I think that's probably one of the better ways to say that, is that in order to really know what the ideal staffing model is, you really need to know and understand all of the responsibilities, not just how do we reduce crime or how do we respond to it. That's right.
So I do believe now that the police force is going to be looked at very comprehensively and it must be, in order to understand how to best allocate these funds that you all will have. And I know it's never enough. At least we're starting somewhere with the new funds that will be allocated to the police department. It's just a resounding cry of the community wanting our police force to be taken care of. And I'm very grateful that we're now looking at this pipeline with these new circumstances. Can you provide any of your thoughts on the pension and how you hope it will be addressed in the future?
Well, I think the pension is, it is part of the overall equation for our efforts to recruit. We're all fishing in a smaller pool. We want the best possible applicants and most qualified applicants for our city, and the current workforce is looking at all of those things. And I think that until that is really in a shape where it gives the potential recruit confidence, I think that it will hurt us in our recruiting efforts. I'll say that much. And
yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly on that. And like I mentioned earlier, so this book, Checkpoints, it's not just available in hard copy, but it is available on Kindle and also available for download on Audible. I think it's $7 on Audible, and I forget how much it was on Kindle. What was it, like $17? And then it's $21 for the physical book. But since this episode's going to be launching right before Thanksgiving, Shannon and I will be taking some books down to, wasn't it the police station that you grew up by? And then also I really want our viewers and listeners to be able to click the link and send a book, send 10 books, send the Audible. How does that work? So if they wanted to send, let's say, Audible credits, because it's much less expensive, right? To just send $7 versus $21. How would they do that?
so there are some options on the website, www.startcheckpoints.com, where you can donate the link. We would send an MP4 to that particular officer, and as many as they may want to send, as well as the Kindle and the book. I will tell you that Amazon is probably, most people that navigate through the website, they're like, well, I could do it here, but I think I'm just going to go to Amazon, and that's fine as well.
Yep.
But we're so appreciative of it. We've had, this city is fantastic for it, but we have had many people who have donated books to agencies. And we've had people reach out to us and just say that they had 25 books delivered to their police department and just thanking me. And it really wasn't me. So I love that the community and that really corporate America is getting involved in shipping books out. We've got to spread the message. We're a small group, but I think this is just another example of collectively that there's nothing we can't do if we work together. And I've seen philanthropic groups and corporate America, and then just people in our community that just want to be part of this, come forward, and you're one of them. So I appreciate that as well.
Yeah, we love you guys. We love you all and appreciate all that you've done and that you continue to do. I cannot wait to watch all that you do. Where do you post the most? I couldn't find a lot on your X.
So I think Instagram and LinkedIn are probably where I'm putting the most out right now. I am.
Yep, LinkedIn's where I found him.
Yeah, and LinkedIn, and then Instagram and Start Checkpoints at Start Checkpoints.
I cannot wait. I'm gonna follow you in all of your new adventures, and I really hope that you'll remain in touch because, again, I'm a big fan, big supporter, and I just appreciate your time. So it's tough to step away from our gorgeous new studio, but the delicious food at Box Bites makes it totally worth it. This charming little shop had only been open 1 week when we visited, so like us, they're soaking up all the excitement of being fresh and new. Come along as we explore Box Bites in Dallas.
Yeah. My name's Paige Muller, and I started Box Bites 4.5 years ago. My fiance and I made these cheese and charcuterie boxes and just delivered them to friends' houses with like a "I'll see you soon" kind of note. And then they posted on Instagram, and then their friends and followers were like, wait, I want a cheese and charcuterie box delivered to my house. And so on and so on, and 4.5 years later, here we are in our first retail space. So over here in the grab and go fridge, we have everything we make in-house, fresh every single day. And then we replenish it constantly. So it's lunchtime right now, so as things go out, we just kind of keep replenishing and adding more, but we make the Caesar salad, Greek salad, all of our dressing in-house, hummus, dips, sandwiches. The ginger green tea is to die for.
Ooh, I will be having one of those.
Yes.
I will be buying one.
And then we have, on Thursdays through Saturday, or if people order in advance, pre-made cheese and charcuterie boards, and also crudité boards with our fresh made dips for quick grab and go. And then over here we have this is kind of the main star of the show, if you will. So every day it's a create your own experience. And so we have a create your own yogurt parfait bar, or a build your own cheese and charcuterie box, which is really, really fun. So for the cheese and charcuterie boxes, and I'll hop over there and we can make you one, but we've got 3 different sizes. Our cutie, for example, is $15, and you get to pick 4 items. So any 4 items that you want, whether you want 4 cheeses, meats, mixed nuts, dried fruit, and all of our selection changes daily.
Oh.
Same thing with the yogurt parfait. It's different yogurts, different fruits, different granolas, lots of different options.
That's great. So we could do 3 small individuals.
Okay.
And then one of these large boxes.
Perfect.
Good. So it has everything here. Mild cheddar, Gouda, Colby Jack, Manchego. I love cheese.
Yes. So this is our For Us box, and you get 8 items.
Great.
So you can pick any 8 that you'd like, and then it also comes with 2 spreads. So we have a local Texas honey, a Mike's hot honey, or a fig spread.
Can we do the hot, the spicy, and the fig?
Of course.
Spread.
Great choice.
Okay, and then anything with spicy, I'm sold.
Yes.
And then whatever you think.
Do you want me to just make it for you?
Yeah, make it for us,
Okay,
since
perfect.
we'll all be kind of eating, and then we'll probably be hungry after, and we'll get another box. Like, what's going through your mind right now while you're sitting here piecing all of this? Are you like, okay, I'm gonna pick my favorite
I kind
cheese?
of try to do the most popular items and what everybody seems to really enjoy.
Great.
And then I usually try to add something that maybe you've never had before. That sounds just wonderful and delicious.
Amazing.
The goal was kind of to create, like, bring special moments to life is all that I really want to do. And having a space where people can come and kind of be a one-stop shop.
Yeah.
Get your cheese and charcuterie. Let's say you're going to somebody's house for dinner, and you want to get a cheese and charcuterie box.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Grab a wooden board.
Yep.
We have wooden boards over there. Hostess gifts, thank you notes, like cards, nice cards. And then soon we're going to start selling wine and champagne. So you'll be able to kind of get everything all in one swoop, which is really fun.
So I have a question. For corporate events, do people normally do the box size bites, or the
It
cutie?
depends. So these boxes that say, like, every time you walk through our door we do a happy dance, these are specific for the pop-up, for the storefront.
For the store.
Yes. And then all of those boxes up there on our top shelf that are tied with lavender and twine,
They're
that's
beautiful.
typically what we do for corporate orders.
Okay.
So we also do lunch boxes for, like, company office lunches, and so they're tied with twine and dried lavender, and they have a sandwich, chips, and a cookie, which is a great little office
that's
lunch.
perfect. Isn't that gorgeous?
Any edits, changes, tweaks?
No, it's gorgeous.
Okay, perfect. Just so you know, for these, it obviously doesn't include crackers or anything like that, but we have a whole pantry section over here where you can get crackers, where you can get lavash from Empire Baking, whole baguettes, additional fig spreads.
Oh my gosh, and you even have little books.
Oh yeah, those are for kids
For
to read
kids when they're here. Oh my gosh.
So mom can have a glass of wine and kids can
That's
read a book
great.
and have a snack.
So, okay, which ones do you recommend to try those with?
I personally love these, rosemary and olive oil. These are
We'll try those.
These are the long crackers, which are great. And then let's say you really love and enjoy the fig. Let's say you really love and enjoy the fig spread. We sell lots of different varieties of them in-house. And everything we can always tie a gift bow around and make it a special gift.
And then these 3, are they
let's
are
talk
there
about
all
that.
different flavors of yogurt?
So the yogurts and the granolas and the fruits and everything, the offerings change daily. Today we have a Greek vanilla, which is definitely our most popular.
Yeah.
We also have a low-fat vanilla. Would you like any almond butter or peanut butter?
Almond butter, please.
Okay, perfect. Okay, and so with the small size, you get the yogurt, of course, and 3 toppings.
May I do the peanut butter chocolate granola?
Absolutely, great choice. Would you like any honey or agave or Malden salt on top?
Salt?
Okay, I had never had it before. But there was a family that I lived with when I lived in New York, and he would always make me yogurt parfaits with honey and Malden salt, and it was just like to die for. It's really good.
I'll try it.
Try it.
I have to bring the kids here.
They would love it.
Oh gosh, yes.
We're just gonna go a little salt.
Uh-huh.
Then your large, and you've got a hummus. The hummus, like I said, we make in-house. Keisha makes it every day. It's
good.
I really think you'll love it. Here, totals $141.81. I'll give you guys a bag. Aren't they so cute?
They are cute. Oh, and you have the little location.
So if anybody gets lost, we're just right here.
Oh, that's
You can
so
find us.
cute.
I really thought Saturdays were gonna be chill. No, not at all, not at all. We had this whole fridge filled with party boards. We have different size boards. We have some that are $75 price point, and we have some that are $175.
Uh-huh.
We have crudité boards for $50. Like, we try to really have a range of everything and different styles of the boards. And on Saturday, we filled this fridge 6 different times. And every time it was sold out, like, I couldn't make them fast enough.
That's
which is so cool.
amazing. Yeah,
It's really, really exciting.
congratulations.
It was funny on Halloween, which was our first Thursday. We did a little, like, I put a little, good?
Oh my gosh.
I'm so glad you love it.
It's
good.
it's unreal.
And we try really hard to have like the highest quality of ingredients of every single category of everything, because all of those little things really make a huge difference.
Oh my gosh,
So-
the granola, the salt. Oh my God.
You would have never thought that, right? So we put a little sign out and said, like, today we're doing charcuterie boards. And it was like charcuterie with candy and like a little candy corns and things like that. And I just couldn't even make them fast enough because I would bring it out and then somebody was like, oh, I'll take one. So I'd go back and I'm like, oh, okay, I'm gonna make 2 just so we have an extra. And then by then more people wanted it and they couldn't even make it to the fridge. So that being said, now we know we need to staff a little bit more.
Yeah.
And we just need some more hands, which is cool.
That's amazing. It
It's
is.
a great problem to have.
Congratulations.
Thank you. No, thank you guys so much for coming in.